Oh, look, a Twitter thread about the new Peter Pan and Wendy movie. I'm sure it's filled with nuanced discussion about the intricacies of... So the trailer for the new Peter Pan and Wendy movie came out a couple weeks ago, and the reception for it has been... mixed. And to accompany the mixed reception from the trailer, there was a Twitter thread by Popbase that says, "First look at Yara Shahidi as Tinkerbell in Disney's Peter Pan and Wendy." And as I was reading over the responses, which are pretty typical for what you might expect from a response thread on Twitter, I noticed that a lot of the people commenting on the movie, or Yara more specifically, fall into three main categories. The first category is people who are being overly congratulatory about it, and seem to think that this actress in this role can do no wrong and they're perfect, and as such they are above criticism. And the second group of people say that instead of casting people of color in roles that have been historically played by white characters, that they should be making more original stories, casting and featuring black people. The argument here is that casting people like Yahara in the role of Tinkerbell is just posturing by Disney and doesn't really mean or accomplish anything. And then there's the third group of people who hate the fact that the movie is being remade at all. They're saying things like the original movie was beloved and it's being butchered as some kind of a social stunt to forward an agenda. And this final group of people falls into two main categories. The first being people that are upset that a historically white role has been race swapped, and the other being a group of people that are just mad that a movie that they loved as a kid is being remade at all. And I think that this last section is the most important, and as such it's going to be the longest, so I've placed it at the end of the video for that reason. But if that's the part you're most interested in, then absolutely feel free to skip there. I should have the chapters all set up for you. But I think all of these groups are missing the point, and they're all wrong in one way or another. And before you label me as woke or say that I'm just saying this because it's the popular discourse on Twitter, I hope you'll watch the whole video and realize that I'm trying to give a nuanced take on this entire discussion. I want to explain why I believe that most everyone who's having a reaction, whether they're for the remake of the movie or against the remake of the movie, is wrong in at least one way. Now to the first group of people who are super congratulatory and swooning over the fact that Yara Shahidi is beautiful. I mean, of course she is. Disney doesn't cast people that aren't conventionally attractive. Essentially every Disney prince and princess ever in the live remakes are all very good looking. Lily James in the Cinderella remake? Absolutely beautiful. Will Smith in the Aladdin remake is jacked. Mensa Masad in the same remake is slim and very handsome. And don't even get me started on Dan Stevens and his Beast Force. My point is, if you want to be mad about Disney characters in Disney movies, be mad about the fact that there are no conventionally unattractive people depicted in these remakes. There's not even really anyone that's just kind of average. I specifically could complain, for example, because I am of average height, and there's no male Disney actors that are of average height. All the men are tall and good looking. And I know there's some of you that are going to jump in here and say, yeah, but fairies are supposed to be beautiful. It's like their whole point. And to these people, I have to say, unfortunately, fairies don't exist, so they're not supposed to be anything. See, main characters in Disney are either hot if they're the good guys or sometimes the bad guys, or if they're overweight or otherwise conventionally not mainstream attractive, then they tend to be the kind of bumbling idiots or comedic relief, just like Smee is in the original Peter Pan. Oh, imagine that. A stereotype. But Disney's beautiful person casting doesn't stop with the remakes, but it extends to the animations as well. And I'm not talking about things like the animated characters themselves, although, I mean, but I'm specifically talking about the voices. See, the male voices in a lot of these Disney animated movies tend to be deep and very masculine, and the women tend to have feminine but very crisp and very clear voices. You'll notice that in the voice acting, nobody cracks or stammers or has to repeat themselves or stumbles over their words or anything like that that we might see in normal day-to-day dialogue. And the few times it does happen, it's usually for the sake of comedy or for forwarding the story in some very specific way. See, normal human speech isn't as smooth as it's depicted to be in these Disney animated movies. Just like looks are in the remakes, the voices in the animated movies are idealized. When I make these videos, they're usually between 10 and 20 minutes long, but the actual filming and the raw footage that I'm done with is usually closer to an hour, because I tend to misspeak or read my script improperly or stumble over my words, or my voice will crack, and so I'll go back and I'll report So I'll go back and I'll record those parts again, and I'll cut out the bits where I mess up. People are being overly congratulatory or complimentary of a thing that Disney specifically designed to be that way so that people would enjoy it. If you want to be mad about something, be mad about the fact that Disney is claiming to be diverse and representative, but actually it's really just picking one easy aspect of diversification or representation and doubling down on that one because it's profitable. They would never tell a story about a 5'9" Prince Charming that's got a body like this, profoundly average, because it's not profitable to do so, and so they're not interested in that type of diversification or representation. Now, as a white male, I don't think this is something I should be commenting on, and so really I'm going to try and avoid that. Rather, what I'm going to do is read other people's comments on that and then give good faith critiques of the logic that they've used. Starting with this Twitter take that says, the reason studios make beloved characters black in the live action adaptations is so they don't have to go through the trouble of actually giving special brand new unique characters made from scratch to black people. And I think by and large this is actually a correct take, because really what Disney's doing is they are taking two popular things and hoping to combine them into a third, also popular thing. The two popular things they're taking are a movie that is popular and then a social good that is popular, and they're hoping that they are able to put these together into a movie that is profitable. It's not about race, rather it's all about profit, and let me prove this to you. You may remember in the Star Wars movie The Rise of Skywalker that there's this lesbian kiss towards the end, and you may notice from just having seen it right now that this kiss is put in a scene by itself, and that's very intentional because it makes it very easy to edit out of cuts that run in other countries. In Singapore, for example, Disney cut out this specific kiss because it would have taken the movie from a PG-13 rating to an NC-16 rating, and that would have banned anyone under the age of 16 from going and watching the movie, and that would have caused Disney to lose a lot of money. And because Disney only cares about doing the most profitable thing, they cut the kiss out, because the most profitable thing was to not have it in there so that more people would see the movie. And furthermore, this scene was actually largely criticized as being tokenism, which, don't get me wrong, it absolutely is, but here are some statistics. In America, about 79% of Americans support gay rights, so the version of the movie that we saw here in America has this gay kiss. However, in Singapore, only about 40% of people support gay rights. So in the scene that aired there, it's taken out because it's not about rights or diversification. It's never been about rights or diversification. It's about making money and making investors happy. And your rights and your diversification don't give the 10% return on investment that the S&P 500 does. See, companies are very risk averse, and telling original or unknown stories is very risky, and as such they tend to avoid doing it. And because there aren't many famous black stories in the West, we don't really hear about them because it's risky to tell, and Disney only cares about profit, so they're not willing to take that risk. But I also think this risk aversion is actually the wrong move on the part of Disney, because we've seen several movies do very well that are original stories, and primarily those were because of word of mouth. Think about movies like Everything Everywhere All at Once, The Greatest Show, or Parasite. These were all newer stories told in a more original fashion that didn't have a huge IP backing them, and yet they all turned out to be very profitable. People who are upset that original stories for black people aren't being told are absolutely right to be upset about that. And the fact that they're not getting these stories proves that it's just all for profit, and it doesn't really have anything to do with representation. Now, the group of people that absolutely hates the change in general, I think has a lot of good faith actors that are just upset that a story they loved when they were kids is being altered for the sake of making a quick buck. And while I think that sentiment is understandable, I do disagree with the logic there. Now, I realize there are people in this category that are pretty much just upset that Tinkerbell is now black, and if that's your only issue with it and why you're hating on it, then I feel like you probably have issues beyond what I can reasonably address and help you with in this video. But if you're someone that's not a fan of how things are depicted in the trailer and you feel like they're just doing it to try and appeal to modern audiences or forward a woke agenda, then this section is for you. And that's because I, in good faith, am going to disagree with you, but I want you to follow along and try and understand the logic I'm putting forward here, because my objective is not to attack, but rather to explain. The first thing I want to say is the corporation that you watch the 1953 version from doesn't care about you. And in the same way, the corporation that you're watching the 2023 trailer from also doesn't care about you. And I get that some of you are upset because you feel like you grew up on this story. And in that case, I would say there's a bit of an issue there, because you're basing too much of your youthful childhood identity around thousands of 2D images that were put together by a racist and abusive company. And the original also had its fair share of poor racial depictions. And if you don't want to see the story that you love changed, then don't watch the movie. And I don't mean that condescendingly. I mean that seriously. I don't plan to watch the movie either, because I watched the trailer and frankly it looks terrible, along with the fact that I don't think I've enjoyed a single Disney live-action remake that I've seen. So I am going to vote with my wallet and refuse to see them. If enough people are collectively not giving them money, then they'll see that this is not what general audiences want, and they will stop making them. But for the people saying things like they shouldn't be changing the story from the original just to fit modern audiences or popular mainstream narrative of today, I think that argument is invalid as well, because the story has been changed pretty much every time it's been told. See, back in the original Peter Pan of 1902, Peter Pan is supposed to be 7 days old and part bird, and more importantly, he's actually never physically depicted in the entire work, with the idea being that Peter Pan could be whatever you wanted him to be. He was limited only by your imagination. The fact that he isn't given a physical description is very intentional by the original author, J.M. Barrie. So if, for example, a Peter Pan movie was made in which Peter Pan was black, that would technically be true to the source material, because the idea of Peter Pan is that he could be anything the children's imaginations wanted him to be. And as for Tinkerbell, she doesn't even exist in the original story at all. People are complaining that they're changing the original work, when Tinkerbell is actually the original change from the original work. That change is just being changed a little more. The story of Peter Pan has had 9 different iterations since 1902 when it was first published. You can't just pick your favorite one and then decide everything after that is bad in changing the story and criticize them. Now I realize a lot of people will make the argument that those original depictions of Peter Pan, they were in books and in plays, and really what they're concerned about is changes from the depictions of him in the original movie. And to that, I would say, may I present you with the original Peter Pan movie from 1924. That's right, Disney's version of Peter Pan is a remake from a movie 29 years earlier. And while the plot and story beats in the animation are very similar to the original 1924 version, they do make some large changes, like the fact that in the original version, the dog is just a human dressed up in a dog costume. Like, forget race swapping, they species swapped the dog. But there are also much more relevant changes made in Disney's 1953 animated version. For example, Wendy in the animated version is depicted as being very caring and motherly towards John and Michael, her brothers. She does things like help clean up, help them take their medicine, help them go to bed, and stuff like that. But in the original 1924 version, she's actually not depicted like that at all at first. She's depicted as not wanting to take her medicine, not wanting to go to bed, and things like that. She only becomes motherly when she goes to Neverland with Peter Pan and agrees to be the mother to the lost boys. But before that, she's really not. She's just one of the kids. And Mr. Darling in the 1924 version is actually depicted as a very nice man and a good father. He plays with the kids and helps the human dog creature help them take their medicine and helps put them in bed and stuff like that. But in the 1953 version, they remake him as some sort of because he's rude to his wife and to the kids and he's mean to the dog. But I don't see a single person being upset that they entirely remade his personality from the original movie in 1924 to the remake in 1953. No one seems to have an issue with that. And that's on top of the fact that him in the 1924 version is the 4th iteration of Mr. Darling, because it's the 4th iteration of Peter Pan. Now, going back to Tinkerbell, she was originally written into the story in 1904, 2 years after the original Peter Pan story had come out, and that was because J.M. Barrie adapted Peter Pan to be a stage play. And she was originally depicted by having a mirror reflect light on stage, and all her communication was done by bells that were being held by someone off stage. She didn't have a race or a gender at all. Now, to be fair, the first Tinkerbell depicted on the big screen and, the moving picture in the 1924 version was played by Virginia Brown Fair, and she was a white female. But that shouldn't mean much, because basically all the actors and actresses of the time were white. It was 1920s. Now, the earliest data I could find about actor demographics is from 1955 to 1989, and it says that about 9% of actors were black. So, of course, Tinkerbell was white. She was a product of her time when basically all actresses were white. So why can't the new Tinkerbell be a product of her time now, when a lot of actresses are black? But I do get that some of you don't want a story that you grew up with and feel nostalgic for to be butchered by a corporation that's just looking to make profit. And that argument by itself, with no racial implications, is a valid argument. And to that I would say, just don't watch the movie. Most of the live actions, like I said earlier, haven't been very good, and I have no reason to believe that this one is going to be any better. But to bring race into it as if that has any kind of relevancy for anything involved is really just not the move. I think the big thing I've learned from this is that people don't realize that Disney doesn't see color. They don't see white and they don't see black. They pretty much just see green. And if casting an actress of color means that they're going to see more green, then that's what they're gonna do. And even beyond that, if prominently featuring these black actresses in trailers brings in a lot of controversy, then that's actually pretty good for Disney and for the movie. Race swapping roles gets lots of people talking about the movie, with lots of people in support of it and lots of people opposed to it. And because our social media algorithms push things based on how much people are talking about them, these kinds of discussions will get a lot of attention and a lot of boosts on people's social media feeds. And the result of that is millions of dollars in free advertising. Twitter threads like this go viral and get millions of views. Huge channels like The Critical Drinker talk about it and get millions of views. And with this kind of thing, all publicity is good publicity. This specific Twitter thread, for instance, got 26.5 million views. Now, on YouTube advertising, one view costs about 1/10 of a cent. So if we extrapolate the numbers based on 26.5 million free views, you're looking at about $250,000 in free advertising, and that's just for this one Twitter thread. You add that up for all the tweets and all the YouTube videos talking about it, and that's millions of dollars in free advertising. What it really comes down to is Disney will do progressive things when progressive things make money, and Disney will refrain from doing progressive things when refraining from doing progressive things makes money. Because in Disney's eyes, you're not white and you're not black. You're a profit margin. Thanks for watching.